Scouts, it is Kaylee from Kampikawa and happy Constellation Station Week. Today we are going to be discussing story creation with the constellations. So the constellations mostly have stories attached to them, and a lot of these stories come from ancient Greek mythology about the Greek gods and goddesses that make up the Olympian Parthenon. These stories are all quite old and there's lots of different versions of them, which is what brings us to our storytelling element of today. I am going to be reading you a version of these myths that comes from this book here. This is Percy Jackson's Greek Heroes. This book comes from a series of books known as the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, which is a fictional story about a boy named Percy Jackson who is the son of Poseidon. And he's got quite a unique voice. He's a teenage boy, he's been through a lot because of the Greek gods, so he's maybe not on the best of terms with them. And so he's got a really unique voice with which to tell these stories. So after you've watched this video today, if you're thinking about story creation yourself, maybe go and have a look at some Greek myth stories to do with the constellations and try and rewrite them in the voice of your favourite character. So the myth that we're going to look into today, as told by Percy Jackson, is the story of Hercules because it links into more constellations than any other Greek myth. So, Hercules. Where do I start with this guy? Even his name is complicated. I'm going to call him by his Roman name, Hercules, because that's how most people know him. The Greeks called him Heracles. Even that wasn't his real name. He was born either Alcides or Alcaeus, depending on which story you read, but the great hero Al just doesn't have much saying. So we're going to go with Hercules. Now, Hercules was the son of Zeus, the Greek god of thunder and the leader of the Greek gods, and Alcmene. Hera hated Hercules because Zeus is her husband. She wasn't very happy that Zeus had had this child with somebody else. And so she got it into the mind of Hercules' cousin, who was called Eurystheus, that Hercules should come and see him and do lots of jobs for him because Eurystheus was the king at this point. So Eurystheus called on Hercules to come before him and do all these jobs, and Hercules was like, no, I'm not doing that. Why would I do that? But Hera, Zeus's wife, decided that that wasn't good enough. She really wanted Hercules to do these tasks because she hated him, and they're quite hard, and they had a good chance of him not surviving to the end of them. So she made him believe that he had to do it. He flew into a murderous rage over this and did some really bad things, and then he ended up coming to before King Eurystheus to repent for his sins. So, when Hercules arrived at the palace of King Eurystheus, first task, Eurystheus announced. In the region of Nemea, just north of here, a massive lion has been wreaking havoc. I want you to kill it. Does this lion have a name? Hercules asked. Since it lives in Nemea, we call it the Nemean lion. Wow, creative. Just kill it, Eurystheus ordered. That is, if you can. Creepy organ music started playing in the background, so Hercules figured there was some catch to this task. But he shouldered his bow, strapped on his sword, and marched off to Nemea. It was a lovely day for lion killing. The hills of Nemea shimmered in the sunlight. A cool breeze rustled through the woods, making patterns of gold and green across the floor. In the middle of a meadow carpeted with wildflowers, a huge male lion was feasting on a cow carcass, strewing scraps of bloody meat everywhere. The lion was bigger than the largest horse. Muscles rippled under his lustrous gold coat. His claws and teeth flashed silver, more like steel than bone. Hercules couldn't help admiring the majestic predator, but he had a job to do. That thing killed a cow, he reminded himself. I like cows. He drew his bow and fired. The arrow hit the lion's neck. It should have severed the beast's jugular and killed him instantly. Instead, it shattered against the lion's fur like an icicle thrown at a brick wall. The lion turned and growled. Hercules shot until his quiver was empty. He aimed for the eyes, the mouth, the nose, the chest. Each arrow shattered on impact. The lion just stood there, snarling with mild annoyance. Okay then, Hercules drew his sword. Plan B. He charged the lion, with enough force to cleave a redwood tree in half. Hercules brought down his blade on the beast's forehead. The blade snapped. The lion simply shook off the impact. Stupid lion, Hercules yelled. That sword was a gift from Hermes, the messenger god. Roar! The Nemean lion lashed out with his claws. Hercules jumped back just quickly enough to avoid getting disemboweled. His breastplate was shredded like tissue paper. No! Hercules shouted. That was a gift from Hephaestus, another Greek god. The lion roared again. Hercules roared back. He punched the lion between the eyes. The lion staggered, shaking his head. He wasn't used to feeling pain. He wasn't used to retreating either, but he decided Hercules wasn't worth messing with. Cows were easier prey. He turned and bounded into the woods. Oh no, you don't! Hercules ran after him. He followed until the lion disappeared into a cave about halfway up the hillside. Instead of plunging in, Hercules scanned his surroundings. If I were a lion, he thought, I'd pick a cave with 2 exits, so I didn't get trapped. He scouted around. Sure enough, a jagged black fissure led into the cave from the other side of the hill. As quietly as possible, Hercules piled up some boulders, blocking the exit. Now you've got nowhere to run, kitty cat. Hercules circled back to the front entrance and called, Anybody home? A snarl echoed from the darkness, like, No, this is a recording. Please leave a message. Hercules marched inside, forcing the Nemean lion to retreat until his back was against the pile of boulders. Now, kids, cornering wild animals is usually a bad idea. It tends to make them a wee bit cranky. Hercules was an expert on cranky. He crouched in a wrestler's stance. Sorry about this, kitty, he said. You're a beautiful killing machine, but High King Numpty wants you dead. The lion growled. Obviously he didn't think much of High King Numpty. He pounced, but Hercules had been trained by the best wrestlers in Greece. He dodged the claws and slipped onto the lion's back, locking his legs around the beast's ribcage and putting that shaggy neck in a chokehold. Nothing seems to get through your hide, Hercules grunted in the lion's ear. But let's see how you do when no air can get through your throat. He squeezed with all his strength. The lion collapsed. Once Hercules was sure the lion was dead, he stood, breathing heavily, and admired the lion's beautiful fur. That would make an awesome cloak, he said. But how do I skin it? His eyes drifted to the lion's gleaming claws. I wonder. He used the lion's own claws to cut the hide. It still took hours of work, but in the end, Hercules had a new fur coat. You might think lion fur would be too hot for everyday use, especially in Greece, where the summers can be sweltering. But Hercules' new cloak was surprisingly light and cool. It was a lot more comfortable than bronze armour. Hercules used the lion's head as a hood and tied it around his neck. Hercules admired his reflection in the nearest pond. Oh yeah, fashionable and invulnerable. So, that's the story of the Nemean lion, which is the reason we have the constellation Leo. Leo is the lion, and it looks like this. It's also one of the 12 zodiac signs. People born July 22nd to August 22nd are Leos. Hercules strolled into town and caused a bit of a kerfuffle. Covered in his Nemean lion cloak, he might have been a beast or a man, or some sort of were-lion from a weird episode of True Blood. The commoners screamed and fled. The guards shot arrows that shattered against his cape. Inside the throne room, Eurystheus heard the commotion. His guards scattered in terror. The burly silhouette of a man-lion appeared in the doorway, and the king set a fine example of courage. He dove into a large bronze pot next to the throne. Hercules couldn't hear or see much with his lion hood pulled over his head. He reached the royal dais, pushed back his shaggy cowl, and was surprised to find the throne empty. "Eurystheus," Hercules called. "Hello? Anyone?" The guards and servants were trembling behind the tapestries. Finally, one of the king's braver heralds, a guy named Coprius, came out waving a white handkerchief. Hello, your hairiness. We didn't realize it was you." Hercules scanned the room. "Where is everyone? Why are the tapestries shaking? Where is the High King?" Coprius dabbed his forehead. The king is indisposed." Hercules glanced at the dais. "He's hiding in that decorative pot, isn't he?" "No," Coprius said. "Maybe. Yes." "Well, tell His Majesty that I have killed the Nemean lion. I want to know my second task." Coprius climbed the steps of the dais. He whispered into the bronze pot. The pot whispered back. "The pot says..." Coprius hesitated. "I mean, the High King says you must go to the swamp of Lerna and kill the monster that dwells there. It is a hydra." "A what now?" Hercules thought he might have heard that name in a Captain America movie, but he didn't know how it applied to him. "The hydra is a monster with many poisonous heads," Coprius explained. "It's been killing our people and our cattle." Hercules frowned. "I hate monsters that kill cows. I'll be back." On the way out of town, Hercules realized he had no idea where Lerna was. He stood there trying to think when a chariot drawn by a team of black horses pulled up next to him. "Need a ride?" The young man at the reins looked very familiar, but Hercules had been away from his home from so long that he barely recognized his young nephew. "Iolaus?" Hercules laughed with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Uncle. I heard about your 10 labours and I want to help." "Thank you, Iolaus. I could use a ride. Do you know where to find this swamp of Lerna?" "I've got GPS. Climb aboard." Together, Hercules and his trusty sidekick rolled out of town in the newly christened Hercules-mobile. "I've heard rumours about this hydra," said Iolaus. "Supposedly, it has 9 heads. 8 of them can be killed, but the 9th head is immortal." Hercules scowled. "How does that work exactly?" "No idea," Iolaus said. "But if you chop off one of the mortal heads, 2 new ones sprout to take its place." "Ridiculous!" "Yeah, well, looks like we're going to find out soon." The chariot stopped to the edge of the swamp. Mist clung to the ground. Stunted trees clawed upward from the moss and mud. In the distance, a large shape moved through the curtains of switchgrass. The tall grass parted, and the strangest monster Hercules had ever seen came lumbering through the mire. 9 serpentine heads undulated hypnotically on long necks, occasionally striking at the water to snap up fish, frogs, and small crocodiles. The monster's body was long and thick and mottled brown, like a python's, but it walked on 4 heavy clawed feet. Its 9 pairs of glowing green eyes cut through the mist like headlights. Its fangs dripped with yellow poison. "Which head is immortal? They all look the same," Hercules asked. Iolaus didn't answer. Hercules glanced over and saw that his nephew's face was white as bone. "Stay calm," Hercules said. "It'll be all right. Did you bring any torches?" "Torches? Yes," said Iolaus. With trembling hands, Iolaus brought out a bundle of tar-covered reeds. He lit the end with a spark of flint. Hercules pulled 6 arrows from his quiver. He wrapped the tips in oilcloth. "I'm going to provoke the monster. Make it charge us. You want it to charge? Better to fight it over here on solid ground, not over there where I could slip in the mud or fall in quicksand. Hercules lit his first arrow. He shot it into the switchgrass, which immediately erupted in a sheet of flames. The hydra hissed. It darted away from the fire, but Hercules shot another arrow right in front of it. Soon, the swamp was an inferno. The monster had nowhere to go except straight toward them. It charged, smoke rolling off its dappled brown hide. Stay here, Hercules told his nephew, as Iolaus tried to keep the horses from bolting. By the way, can I borrow your sword? Mine broke. Hercules grabbed the boy's blade and leaped out of the chariot. Hey, spaghetti head! He yelled at the hydra. Over here! The hydra's 9 heads hissed in unison. The monster didn't appreciate being compared to pasta. It charged forward, and Hercules had a moment of doubt. The stench of poison burned his eyes. The monster's heads moved in so many directions that he didn't know where to start. He wrapped his cloak around himself and ran into battle. The hydra's mouth snapped at his cape, but its poisonous fangs couldn't puncture the lion fur. Hercules dodged and weaved, waiting for an opening. The next time one of the snakeheads lashed out, Hercules cut it off. Aha! Take that! Oh no. Unfortunately, Iolaus's information had been correct. Before the severed head even hit the ground, the bleeding stump began to bubble. The entire neck split down the middle like string cheese getting pulled apart, and each new neck spouted a snake head. The whole process took maybe 3 seconds. Oh, come on, Hercules shouted. That's not fair. He dodged and slashed until the ground was littered with dead snakeheads, but the more he cut off, the more grew back. Hercules kept hoping he'd hit the immortal head. Maybe if he separated that one from the body, the whole monster would die. But he realized he couldn't do that by trial and error. The smell of poison was giving him vertigo. Dozens of sets of green eyes swam in and out of his vision. It was only a matter of time before the hydra would score a hit and sink its fangs into his flesh. Hercules needed to stop the heads from doubling. Iolaus, he yelled, get over here with that torch and Wah! One of the monster's necks swept sideways, knocking Hercules off his feet. He rolled, but another neck wrapped around his legs and lifted him off the ground. Hercules managed to break free, and he found himself climbing through a reptilian jungle gym of slimy necks and snapping heads. He punched and kicked, but he didn't dare use his sword. Not yet. Iolaus, he shouted. The next time I cut off a head, I need you to jump in with that torch and sear the stump so it can't grow back. Understand? Crab! Yelled Iolaus. Hercules was sweating with concentration. He punched another snakehead and somersaulted over one of the next. Crab? Crab! What is the boy talking about? I ask him a yes or no question and he answers with crab. Hercules risked a glance at his nephew. Wiggling out of the mud, right in front of Iolaus, was a crab as big as a chariot wheel. Its mouth foamed, its pincers snapped. Hercules had never heard of giant crabs living in a swamp. Hera must be messing with me again, Hercules grumbled. Hold on, Iolaus. He sliced his way out of the maze of hydra necks. He knew that would just cause more of them to grow, but he couldn't let his last surviving nephew get eaten by a crustacean. He launched himself at the crab with a flying kick and brought his heel down right between its eyes. The shell cracked. His foot penetrated the crab's brain, killing it instantly.
Now, that crab is another constellation that we see in the sky. It's the constellation Cancer, the crab, which is also one of the zodiac signs. Cancerians are born between June 21st and July 22nd.
Yuck! Hercules extracted his foot from the goop. Okay, kid, get that torch ready and look out! Iolaus shouted. Hercules spun as the hydra bore down on him. Only the Nemean lion cloak saved him from a dozen new body piercings. Hercules slashed off the nearest head. "Now, kid!" Iolaus thrust the torch against the neck and seared the wound. Nothing spouted from the blackened stump. "Good job," Hercules said. "Only are 50 or 60 more to go." Together they pruned the hydra heads until the air was filled with acrid smoke and the smell of barbecued reptile. Finally, the monster had only one head left, surrounded by a corona of sizzling charred polka dots. Hercules grunted. Of course the immortal head would be the last one. He sliced through the neck. The entire monster collapsed in a heap. The still living head flopped around in the mud, hissing and spitting poison. "Gross," Iolaus said. "What should we do with it?" Hercules clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, nephew. Now, about this immortal hydra head, I suppose there's no way to destroy it." Iolaus shrugged. "That's probably why they call it immortal." Hercules dug a deep pit, buried the head, and covered the grave with a heavy rock, so nobody would ever unearth the nasty thing by accident. Then he and Iolaus rode back home. According to legend, that hydra head is still alive and thrashing somewhere near Lerna under a big boulder. Personally, I'd recommend you don't go looking for it.
The Hydra is another constellation we see in the sky, and it looks like this. It is one of the largest constellations.
Back at the palace, High King Eurystheus had finally emerged from his decorative pot. Hercules explained how he'd defeated the Hydra. He showed the king some of the dead snakeheads and a case of premium crab meat they'd collected from Hera's foamy friend. Eurystheus' eyes glinted. "You say your nephew helped you?" "Well, yeah. He burned the stumps while I—" "Wrong answer!" the king interrupted and pounded his armrest. "No one can help you with your tasks. This deed does not count." And that's how Hercules' 10 labours became Hercules' 11 labours. But you're going to have to come back later on this afternoon to hear about the rest of his labours and how the 11 turned into 12.